Hello, I'm George Graham and I'm the Director here at South Yorkshire Pensions Authority. Welcome to the second SYPA In Focus video. This will tell you what's been going on at SYPA in a busy year, with Debbie Sharp covering the running of the scheme and Andy Stone focusing on a challenging year in the investment markets. We'll also be looking to answer some of your questions as we go along, and in a special section towards the end. Please make sure to read the Q&A document on the website to see all the questions that members submitted.
Hi, I'm Debbie, Assistant Director Pensions. I've been at the Authority since November 2023. The pensions team look after the members and employers in the fund. We have 4 teams: benefits, customer services, employer services, and a technical support team. At the end of this year, we had nearly 51,700 actively contributing members. Just under 64,000 deferred members, who are members who have left their employment and so no longer able to pay into our scheme, or have chosen to opt out of the pension scheme, but their benefits are still held here. And we now have just over 65,500 pensioners and dependents. In total, that means we're looking after benefits for over 181,000 members. Over 70% of the fund membership that we're looking after is female. This does reflect the general workforce across local government. And in the same way as there is a gender pay gap, there is a gender pensions gap. You may have heard lots about the gender pay gap for many years. It follows that in a defined benefit scheme, lower pay will also mean lower pensions. This is now being tracked in our fund and reported to the board. We're doing our best to raise awareness of this amongst the female active membership, as this is the category that still has an option to maximise their benefit while still employed and being a member of the fund. Female pensioners in our fund currently are receiving on average just under £4,500 in pension a year less than male pensioners, and the deferred female members will receive just over £1,000 in pension less than their male deferred members. There are a number of factors that influence this difference. Salary is obviously a big contributor, but so is part-time working or taking career breaks to raise a family. So the teams cannot look after these benefits without the fund employers. They are responsible for providing data to the Authority for all of their employees who are members of the scheme. There are 575 employers providing data on a monthly basis for those 51,700 active members. That's a lot of data. What is interesting is the change in the membership and the number of fund employers over the last 20 years. The membership has increased by 75%. In 2005, there were just over 100,000 members. This is now 181,000 members. The increase has mostly been down to the large increase in deferred and pensioner members across those years. Not the active membership though, which hasn't really changed. This reflects the change in employment trends in local government. Fewer people work in the same job their whole life anymore. There is far more movement. This creates more benefit calculations for the team to process. The change in employers is even greater. They have increased by 500%. 20 years ago, we had just 116 employers. As I just mentioned, the increase in membership and employers in the fund means more work to process for the team. You will see that this year the benefits team have processed over 100,000 pieces of casework. That could be a retirement, a transfer, a refund, you get the picture. We workflow every calculation we have to undertake. Casework has been steadily growing though over the last few years, and as the team wasn't resourced for this increase, a backlog of unprocessed work grew. This was putting the teams under pressure and reducing the service we could offer our membership. The authority had acknowledged that the team wasn't big enough to cope with the workload and agreed to increase the staffing number back in 2023. An improvement plan was drawn up which included a revised organisation structure of the teams within pensions. Great strides have been made to implement this across the year. This revised team structure, along with the staffing increase, meant a large-scale recruitment drive. This included increasing the benefits team from 5 teams processing the complex benefits to 6. 2 new service managers to lead employer services and technical support and training. Technical support and training are responsible for in-house training, technical knowledge and data improvement. They took control of the training plans for the new recruits. With all the change going on this year, I was pleased to see that data scores for the pensions regulator were not detrimentally affected. Overall, the member data was improved across the year in preparation for the 2025 valuation, a great achievement with so much change taking place. We still have a way to go, but backlogs are reducing. Work on training and bringing casework up to date will continue over next year. One area of disappointment was the lack of software development. The software provider is still behind with the changes needed for the McLeod remedy and the rectification. Most retirement pensions are able to be calculated correctly, but we are not able to go back and correct any previous calculations yet. If the member is a protected member, we will need to revisit their benefit calculation. A decision was made by the Authority Board to extend the time frame for undertaking this work to the 31st of August 2026. I will cover the McLeod remedy a little later on. During the year, 2 existing teams were brought together to create employer services. This team supports the employers to understand their responsibilities under the pensions legislation. A big part of this is ensuring the monthly member data from the 574 employers is accurate, on time, and the payment due is collected by direct debit. No mean feat. There have been great improvements seen in this area, and it looks like the employers do feel well supported by the improvement in their satisfaction scores this year. With the membership growing, we must ensure that data available on our online portal is up to date. 55% of our membership is actively engaging with us this way. That's over 100,000 members able to view their benefits online and undertake pension forecast modelling for themselves. Members can opt out of digital engagement, but very few have. The over 65s were very engaged last year, with us seeing the number registered in this age group increasing by just under 25%. If you are a member of the fund and still to register, please check out the website and register sooner rather than later. If you are already registered and haven't visited for a while, please revisit soon. A pension with local government is an easy way to save for life after work. It's a defined benefit pension, which means that it's built up by using a fixed formula. This gives you a secure and guaranteed income every year when you stop working. It works like this. Every year you build up a pension based on a fraction of your salary. This is paid into your pension account. At the end of the year, this is added to the total from previous years. This is then revalued to keep up with the cost of living. If you were in the scheme before April 2014, you have membership in the final salary scheme. Final salary benefits are worked out differently, and more information can be found on our website. When you take your pension in later life, the total in your account is your annual pension and is paid to you monthly. You can choose to swap part of it for a tax-free lump sum if you wish. If you leave your job before retirement, you have 2 choices. You can keep your pension account, though you won't be able to pay into it any longer. This is known as a deferred pension, or you can transfer it into another pension provider. You have heard me mention the McLeod remedy. In 2014, the scheme changed from a final salary to a career average scheme. To protect older members, when they retired, the career average pension they built up before age 65 was to be compared with a pension they would have built up if the final salary scheme had continued. The higher amount would be paid, and this protection was called the underpin. The courts have ruled that providing underpin protection to only older members is age discrimination. Rules changed on the 1st of October 23 to remove this discrimination. Qualifying younger members are now also protected. The pension you built up between the 1st of April 14 and the 31st of March 22 may be protected by the underpin if you paid into the LGPS or another public service pension scheme before the 1st of April 2012. You don't need to take any action. The pensions team will work out whether you are protected. When you take your pension, you will automatically be paid the higher amount. You can find out if you are protected and what this means for you on our website. As I mentioned earlier, we will be revisiting the benefit calculations for all members with the McLeod protection over this next year. Our customer services team are still being kept very busy. This year they have answered 37,500 telephone calls and responded to 35,700 emails. We are proud that we can still offer face-to-face appointments too. These can either be via video link or in person in the office. To visit the office though, you must book an appointment. Full details of how to contact us are on the website.
Hello, my name's Andy Stone and I'm the Assistant Director at SYPA, responsible for our investment strategy. Over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to take you through as much as I can fit in, taking a look at the likes of market conditions, the performance of our investments up to our financial year end of 31st of March 2025, our approach to responsible investment, and some of the investments that we've been making to have a local impact. The world has been a very eventful place over the past year or so, and there's little doubt that events and politics have been driving investments more than anything else. The year has played out to a backdrop of war and conflict, with the continuing situation in Ukraine and horrific scenes being witnessed in the Middle East. 2024 was always going to be a huge year in politics, with elections taking place in countries which are home to over half the world's population. The US presidential election was always going to be the most impactful of these. President Trump triumphed and took office for the second time in January 2025. As is often the case with a Republican win, economic markets reacted positively to this outcome, anticipating a low-tax, business-friendly environment. However, there was the little matter of Trump's touted tariff policy from his election campaign and whether he would actually go through with them. That he certainly did, imposing tariffs on roughly 90 countries and territories around the globe, with China at the top of his hit list. Such was the impact of this, equity markets rapidly falling 10%, US borrowing costs increasing, that the majority of these tariffs were paused. Market values recovered, but a lot of damage had already been done. Uncertainty is rife and businesses are finding it challenging to plan and develop as they simply don't know what's going to happen next. Now, at the time of recording this video in August, a number of tariffs have been reimposed. By the time you watch this, that may have changed again. Despite all of this though, the majority of equity markets still delivered positive returns up to the 31st of March. A large chunk of those equity market gains came over the course of 2024. That was particularly true of the US tech sector and those companies known as the Magnificent Seven. Instead of featuring the likes of Steve McQueen and Yul Brynner though, this seven is made up of Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, Nvidia and Tesla. Cracks began to show in January though, when a breakthrough by the Chinese AI company DeepSeek wiped almost $600 billion from Nvidia's market value overnight. Overall, the less heralded UK equity market was one of the best performers, with its more defensive nature and relatively stable politics driving it to 10% plus gains over the 12 months. Bond markets were also affected by tariffs and their potential impact on inflation. This can lead to painful increases in borrowing costs for central governments. The US in particular has an ever-growing debt burden and could face some costly challenges in future. That's the backdrop, so how have SYPA's assets fared over recent times? That very much depends on the period of time we're looking at. The page on screen shows 3 different colour bars. SYPA's actual investment return is shown in, I'm going to say maroon. A benchmark return for each period is navy. That is the expected return for the types of assets we're invested in. And the light pink bar is the return that our actuaries calculated we need to meet our funding targets. Now, as we can see from the charts, our performance has lagged both the benchmark and the actuarial assumption over shorter periods of time, but is ahead of both over 5 and 10-year periods. Now, of course, we're never happy to see periods of underperformance, but pension schemes are multi-decade investors, so it is the longer term that matters the most. Doing a deeper dive, the next chart breaks down our performance from different asset classes over the past 12 months. Most of our major asset classes have underperformed the benchmark during this volatile period. It is worth noting that equities currently make up more than half of our investments, so that is a really big driver of relative performance. Longer term, this is our 5-year returns. The picture looks much better across the board, with all asset classes either outperforming or at least being very close to the respective benchmark returns. We've got yet another chart incoming. This is perhaps the most important one, as it shows the overall funding level of our pension scheme. So that's a comparison of the assets we own against the liabilities being the present value of all the future pensions payments we need to make. Our estimated funding level is looking very healthy at over 150%. That's partly due to steadily increasing asset values, but recently it owes more to falls in the present value of our liabilities. The liability value has fallen thanks to increases in long-term UK interest rates. Moving on from performance, we wanted to update you on our approach to what's known as responsible investment. Firstly, it's a regulatory requirement for us to have a policy which sets out our approach for dealing with environmental, social and governance factors, also known as ESG. But it stands to reason, and there is a lot of evidence out there, that companies who manage ESG risk better will produce stronger returns over the long term. Our aim is to be a good owner of good assets. Hence, we seek to influence the companies we invest in by exercising our right to vote at company annual general meetings, and also use our influence to engage with company management through the Border to Coast Pensions Partnership. That might be in relation to climate, it might be labour practices, it may also be the likes of executive pay. We report on all of this quarterly and in a more formal annual report. Just to illustrate how active we've been in this space, over 8,000 votes were cast across the 4 equity funds we invest in through Border to Coast. That spanned 641 company meetings, with 11% of votes being cast against company management. There are a wide variety of reasons for this, with inadequate climate transition plans being a key one. Now onto engagement, which is essentially the way investors influence companies to improve their behaviours and the management of their ESG issues, and that's always with the objective of improving long-term financial performance. Engagement can be directly by Border to Coast or its partner Robeco. It could be through the external fund managers they utilise, or through the collective work of the local authority pension fund forum. Now, a good example of engagement came with BP earlier this year. BP reduced their climate transition ambitions for a second time without putting this to a shareholder vote. Border to Coast requested that a vote should be included at the 2025 annual general meeting, but BP refused. Border to Coast therefore advised BP they would vote against the re-election of the chair and other directors at the AGM, pre-declaring this ahead of the meeting. In total, 24% of all shareholders voted against the chair's re-election, which does demonstrate the strength of feeling shown. SYPA has a place-based impact strategy in which up to 5% of the fund's assets has been earmarked. Place-based impact investments have the twin aims of generating a commercial return while also delivering positive economic impact. Although some of these impact investments are more nationally focused, a material amount are made directly into South Yorkshire, which is what we're going to focus on here. As at the financial year end, we had almost £110 million invested in South Yorkshire across 26 different assets, and that has had a measurable impact on our region. Our existing investments will help to develop over 400 homes, including these at Eyewitness Works in Sheffield, where I'm sat today, plus purpose-built accommodation for almost 500 students elsewhere in the city centre. We've also provided development loans for industrial and logistic hubs, supporting businesses and creating employment space for around 800 jobs. We've also invested in 10 local companies in the fields of advanced technologies, manufacturing and professional services, which is estimated to have supported a further 460 jobs. And we want this to continue. SYPA has also pledged £20 million of equity investment and a further £20 million of debt funding to 2 specialist managers to support the growth of smaller companies within South Yorkshire. Hopefully, I'll be able to tell you more about that one next year.
Now we come to the section of this annual report back to members where we address the most popular questions asked by members. We've tried to answer other questions during the course of the video, and the answers to all the questions that were asked are available in a document on the website alongside this video. I think, Debbie, you've got the first question.
I have, George, one for you. The government has been talking of merging pension funds to create larger investments, but this has been trialled elsewhere in the world, resulting in poor results. What is SYPA's view on these pooling proposals, and how can it protect our pensions for the future?
I don't think it's fair to say that international comparisons show that this approach has had poor results. Generally, the pension systems that have adopted this approach are regarded as performing better than the British pension system. Within the pooling partnership that SYPA is part of, we continue to seek to make sure the partnership is working in our interests and the interests of all the other partners. This is an entity that we control. Because we control it, we are in the position to decide what it does on our behalf. The government are setting some very clear rules about what our responsibilities are in the new world, but the majority of return is actually generated through setting the investment strategy and deciding how much of each particular type of investment make up the overall portfolio of the fund. So SYPA's approach is to be positive about this process and to make it work in our interests and in the interests of all our scheme members. So far, we've been successful at that.
So, we've had a question on the pensions dashboard, so that's for you, Debbie. Can you provide more information on the pensions dashboard, and when will it be available?
Thanks, Andy. I can do. The government have been talking about wanting to provide pensions dashboards for everybody in the country for a number of years now. They won't be live until possibly very late in 2026 or into 2027. The government, once everybody is connected to the dashboard by 2026, will then look at going live with it. There may not be just one dashboard, there may be multiple dashboards. The government is setting up its own, but also many larger banking institutions or insurance companies may set up their own as well. And what the dashboard will do is you log on to it, ensure that you register and prove that you are who you say you are. The government is taking responsibility for ensuring that all of the security issues are dealt with. They then send information out to pension companies asking whether we hold information in our pension scheme for that person. If we match you, we will send the information back, and then what you as a customer using the dashboard will see is all of your pensions that you've got in one place. This includes the state pension as well. So dashboards, yes, they're coming. It won't be just yet, but watch out. We're putting information on the website and in our newsletters around this. But for information on your benefit from us, please remember you can use our My Pensions portal to look at your own benefits here.
And now one for Andy. How much of my pension is invested in arms companies, and how much of my pension is invested in companies associated with Israel or operating in occupied Palestine territories?
Okay, so two questions there. I'll take the Israel-Palestine question first of all. And with all the answers in this section, it's important to note that we only get detailed information at this level on our assets on a 3-monthly basis, and there's also a 6-month lag time. So everything that I quote, I think, is going to be as at the end of December 2024. With Israel, the amount invested directly into Israeli organisations, so that could be companies or the government, is around £1.8 million of SYPA's total assets. Now, just to put that into context, we are a large pension scheme. We have around £11 billion of assets overall. But that said, we do appreciate the real depth and level of focus around these particular holdings. So in terms of what's held there, £1.4 million of this money is actually held in Israeli government bonds. None of these holdings are held directly by SYPA. They are all held in what are called pool funds that are overseen or managed by Border to Coast. Now, the pool fund setup means that you've got multiple investors in the same fund, which means that it's not possible for SYPA to dictate positions that are held or not held within that portfolio. So with that in mind, we have tried to engage with Border to Coast on this topic. We don't have a relationship directly with PIMCO due to the nature of these funds. And what we've sought to try and understand is their rationale for taking this holding in the first place. We have been given some detail by PIMCO through Border to Coast around their financial rationale, but unfortunately we're still lacking some real transparency and detail on how that relates to their actual actions and ongoing monitoring and their plans for these holdings going forwards. So the second part of the question, we've got around £110 million invested in what's classed as the defence sector. Again, these are not held directly by SYPA. It is worth noting that any of these companies, and some of them are very large, well-known multinational companies, the likes of Rolls-Royce, for example, would all be operating with the relevant government legal licenses. It's also worth keeping in mind that, in common with a lot of different pension schemes, SYPA does not invest in any companies that are responsible for the likes of cluster munitions either, so those are clearly held outside of our portfolio.
So the next one's for you as well, Debbie. It's about survivor benefits. Do I have to nominate someone if I pass away, or does my pension pass away with me?
Where there is a death grant due to an estate, yes, you can nominate who you would like to receive that benefit. You don't have to, but also the decision of who we pay a death grant to is at the discretion of the authority. We will take into account if somebody's made a nomination, but we will also have to take into account information of what is happening in that estate as well. And we will make an assessment. So yes, please do nominate, because that is an important piece of information that we will heavily weight, but also keep that nomination up to date. If we've got a nomination on file, but it may be 20 years old, that nomination may not be followed. You can nominate by using the form on the website, keep it up to date, and it helps us make our decision should there be a death grant due when you decease. Thank you. Right, next one's for you, Andy, as well. Does SYPA still have funds invested in the coal, oil or gas industry? Or has the fund divested from these now? If not, is there a plan to divest from these in the near future?
Thanks, Debbie. So yes, first of all, SYPA does still have funds invested in the energy sector. It isn't something that we necessarily have a direct say in these particular holdings. That said, there is an exclusions policy around companies who get a certain percentage of their revenue from the likes of thermal coal and oil sands. We prefer engagement with companies over divestment. And the reasons for that are that A, we have a seat at the table as long as we own shares in these companies. Secondly, if we were to sell our holdings in the likes of BP or Shell, we aren't really denying them any capital. Those shares just get purchased by somebody else, and it might be another investor who is less interested in the transition to a cleaner economy than we are. And the final point around this is that by divesting from the likes of oil and gas companies, it would most likely, in fact it definitely would, improve the carbon emissions picture of our own portfolios, but it won't actually have any real world impact. So overall, we do think it's useful to continue to hold these companies and continue to push them in the direction that we want to. We do have net zero emissions targets as part of our overall strategy, but the way we want to do this is having that real world impact and actually getting these companies to reduce their own emissions pictures.
Thanks for watching. As you've seen, it's been a busy year, and the changes to the pooling arrangements and the other reforms to the running of the LGPS being introduced by the government mean that the next year is going to be equally busy. Regardless of this, our focus at SYPA will be on making sure we deliver the best possible service we can for our scheme members. As you may have seen earlier this year, this will be my final report to scheme members as I prepare to retire in December. I'm pleased to be leaving you in very capable hands and would like to take this opportunity to introduce your new director at SYPA, Gillian Taberner. Many of you may already know Gillian from her time as our Assistant Director for Resources, and she brings with her a wealth of knowledge and experience about the organisation that will serve SYPA well in the years ahead.